gentlemen, welcome to Destiny Education Hanging with the Fellas podcast with your host, Toina.
Hey, gentlemen, it's Toina, and welcome to another episode of Hanging with the Fellas podcast. As always, Tuesdays are my favorite days, and I'm super excited to be here with you. So today we are going to be talking about what to do now that Trump has officially won the election. So number 45 is now 47. And so whenever we refer to him throughout this conversation, he will be called 47. To begin this, there are some things I want to share with you because many of you don't know some of the information that I'm getting ready to share. Number one, what you saw take place on the night of the election had absolutely nothing to do with Kamala Harris. It had nothing to do with who she was as a person, how she ran her campaign, that she was a woman, none of that. Let me explain to you what it had to do with. For the last 40 years or so, the Republicans have been putting into place a plan that would allow them to take over America. Now, the people who really are taking over are the Christian nationalists. Remember, you cannot be a Christian and a nationalist, for you will love one and hate the other. That's what the Bible tells us. So a gentleman by the name of Paul Weyrich is a white supremacist. He has disdain for anything or anyone who is not white. The reason that you need to understand this is because 40 years ago, he started building a plan. And that plan was to create an environment where Christian nationalists could flourish. A time and a place in America that could take us from where we are today back to the 1800s. What's very interesting about this plan is that as he put it together, he found many people who were willing to go along with him. And it had to be adult people at this time because what was going on is that people had to be willing to raise their kids in this environment of white supremacy. So what he did, he put together and wrote out very clearly this plan, using as his foundation Genesis 11:6, which says, "Behold, the people are one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing shall be restrained from them which they have imagined to do." So I want you to understand this verse because this verse is neither good nor bad. It is a principle that God has already set forth in the world that talks about unity. And unity is just that. It's unity. It doesn't matter if you use it for good. It doesn't matter if you use it for evil. At the time that that verse is used in the Bible, God is referring to the people of the Tower of Babel. Because at that time, what they're doing is they have decided that they want to be gods and they want to build a kingdom that will reach all the way to heaven so that they can rule the same way that God does. Interestingly enough, this is about power during that time. So the people at the Tower of Babel wanted to be all powerful. The same way that the Republicans of today, these Christian nationalists, want to be powerful in their own right today. That's how this all started. The first president that this was unleashed with was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was good up to a point, but when he appointed Sandra Day O'Connor as the first female Supreme Court judge, that became a problem, and it threw a huge wrench into Paul Weyrich's plan because he didn't want women in the Supreme Court, not even one. And this became a problem still because she was pro-choice. And that was what Reagan wanted. He wanted to put someone on there who was going to address the country's issues with choice. That's how this all began. Over time, he began to pick up speed, force, if you will. I want you to think of a snowball rolling down a mountain and gathering more snow as it continues down that mountain until it becomes pretty much an unstoppable force. Before long, you started seeing representatives be elected like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Rand, Marco Rubio, and a few of the other MAGA extremists and election deniers that have been in office recently. And the reason they started there is because if they could build a platform with wildly outrageous thought processes from people on a lower level, it told them that they were going to be able to create the same level of momentum on a higher level. They just had to find the right person to take them into that place. When Donald Trump came along, they realized that it didn't matter what he did. People were going to follow him until the end because they like the crazy. Now we have to look at things a little differently. So while Trump was out of office, they put Project 2025 into writing. Now it may have started before then, but we're going to go with at the time he was out of office, they started releasing this book. It's probably been out for a while, but they started releasing this book. And it spelled out everything that was going to happen in a Trump administration. And because people refused to read, all they had to do was say, I don't know anything about it. Now, 47's name is mentioned in that book over 326 times. Do you really think that when someone's name is mentioned 326 times, they don't know anything about it? Really think about that. Because there's no world of logic where the answer to that question is no, they don't know anything about it. So tonight I want to talk to you about some very disturbing things that are coming. Because for Hanging with the Fellas, many of you are multiracial, single racial, and I want you to understand what's getting ready to happen. Now, I'm going to tell you that what I'm going to share with you tonight is going to seem a little wild, but I'm going to help you put together the pieces so that you can begin to see for yourself and to come up with your own conclusion. You know, one of the big talking points right now is immigration. It's removing illegal immigrants. Everybody seems to have a problem all of a sudden with illegal immigrants. I'm not sure why. Because during the slave trade, nobody had a problem with illegal immigrants. And when our farms were being picked daily by quote unquote illegals, nobody had a problem with paying 25 cents for strawberries. But now today, all of a sudden, the only thing that's immigrating over here are criminals. So I want to give you something to think about. How many of you remember Pablo Escobar? Pablo Escobar was a major drug dealer out of Colombia. Pablo Escobar very rarely ventured into the United States. Fidel Castro, who was considered, if I recall correctly, a socialist, also didn't really spend much time in the United States. Both men they called criminals. So let me tell you the irony of this. Criminal elements do not move to other countries when they are well established and successful in the country that they already live in. Unless they are sent here by a boss, they don't come. And if they are sent here by a boss, they aren't crossing at the border. It just doesn't happen. Now, let me tell you about San Diego, California, and Southern California. They have signs with a mother, a father, and a child kind of flying in the wind, letting people know to beware that there are migrant crossings there. So here's what I want you to understand. If illegal immigration was truly the issue, they wouldn't have to change the Constitution for that. You simply have your ICE agents go, grab up anybody who's illegal or undocumented, and take them back to whatever country they came from. So what is an illegal really? It's someone who doesn't have permission to be in the country. So for example, if I as an American crossed into Mexico with the expectation that I would never return, and I didn't have a passport, I have illegally entered the country. And that means that I am now an illegal alien in Mexico. You with me? That's what it means to be an illegal alien, a migrant, if you will. They simply don't have permission to be in this country. So instead of just dealing with this group at the border and adding a few more agents, one of the things that 47 keeps as a talking point and now has appointed Stephen Miller, who is anti any form of color. Stephen Miller has talked about all of us who have dark skin being vermin. Those who look like me, those who are Latino, Filipino, anybody with dark skin, or anybody who is non-white. So to get rid of this vermin problem that they have, they bring up, especially in Project 2025, the altering of the Constitution. Okay, why would I need to alter the Constitution? What rights are given in the Constitution that would allow me to deal with the vermin problem? So let me redefine vermin for you. It's anybody with darker skin. Blacks, browns, Latinos, Filipinos, Asians, anybody who has darker skin. Asians don't often have darker skin, but they are non-white. With me? Let me tell you why. For those of you who aren't making the connection, I would need to terminate the Constitution. Because if I want to get rid of Black people who are born legally in this country and by the 14th Amendment, because they were born here, have citizenship rights in this country, I have to go back to the 1800s and remove their freedom to be citizens of the United States of America. It's the only way I can remove a group of people who rightfully belong. So where in history do we see an example of this? The Holocaust. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that if any of you listening to this say the Holocaust isn't real, please do not subscribe to this channel. And if you are subscribed, remove yourself from this channel, because that is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. Of course, the Holocaust is real. But if I, as a white supremacist, don't want you looking into the Holocaust to figure out what it is I'm doing or the hand that I'm playing, I'm going to keep giving you the rhetoric that the Holocaust was never real. Understand this, because prior to January 20th of 2025, you have time to get yourself together and get out of the country. There are some things that are better fought outside of the situation than in. So let me give you an example. If I want to save my child from a gang, it's not going to do me any good to go become a part of the gang. I have to stand outside that gang, reach in and pull my child out, because it's going to mean that I need to move, I need to relocate him, so the members of this group can't find him. That's what I mean when I say you have to work from the outside in. Listen, terminating the Constitution in the first week is going to give this Trump group the freedom to move all the people out of this country that they want gone. It is going to fulfill the goals of all the white supremacists. When Paul Weyrich came up with this plan, all of this was a part of it. While it feels chaotic and discombobulated, understand this and understand this well. It is a beautifully executed, highly strategic plan that will allow for the United States to be completely taken over. Now, I want to share with you some struggles that are going on. You know, while the Democrats are working diligently to come up with ulterior plans to cover and keep at bay Trump's potential threats, they will not be successful, because they already looked into what's going to happen when people rebel, and they already have a plan for how they're going to address it. Now, here's the problem. When you are talking about this and you're looking at it from the wrong perspective, you're not looking at it from the perspective under which it was designed. You're more reactionary than you are someone who is at the forefront. We're going to fight it before it gets here. Or long ago, like 40 years ago, when we saw the writing on the wall that something like this was coming. These guys already have plans in place for that. And so it's not going to be difficult to thwart any, quote, resistance efforts. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying, because many of you will think you're being negative. I am not being negative. There's a huge difference between being pragmatic and being negative. If I see something coming, it's my job to warn you that it's coming. What you choose to do with that information, now that's up to you. While all of this is going on, what does everybody keep talking about? They keep talking about actual immigrants, people who are new to this country. They are not talking about people who have darker skin, which means you're playing two different games. The Democrats are not even in the same field right now as where the Project 2025 people are. This is a well thought out, smoothly executed plan that is going to come into focus. The problem is, if we don't stop Trump from taking office, that plan will be executed, and it will be a very long road to get our country back. Now, here's the beauty. As long as God allows us to, the day will come when we will get our country back. I don't know how long it'll be, because it was a very long road for the Holocaust survivors. But this is that point, as the German Work Party was taking over, where the Jews had the freedom to go and to get away while this stuff was going on. And I just want you to think about that, because we have reached a place where you have to decide for your family if this is really the America you want. I want to tell you a story about a gentleman I work with. He and his wife were celebrating their anniversary, and they went into Las Vegas, Nevada, and they ran across 5 guys talking to 3 black women, telling them that their bodies belonged to them and that they could do all sorts of unmentionables to these women and wouldn't suffer any consequences. You really want your daughters to live through that? This is a tough time, because along with having to think about all these other things, it's going to cost you some people that you call friend. Let me explain why. A vote for 47 or 45 is a vote against humanity. And instead of looking at it that way, instead of listening and logically really dealing with what was being said and how it would impact people who didn't look like them, they focused on what it was they wanted. They looked at inside of them and said, what is going to be best for me? Now, some of you will say everybody thinks that way. To a point, yes, that is a true statement. I am going to make sure I have food in my house before I go and take somebody else $300 worth of food. Because if I give them all the food that I have for that week, then what will we eat? So yes, in that sense, it makes sense that I would think about myself first, and then out of the abundance or the leftover, I would then fund somebody else's groceries. But that's not what happened with 45. What happened with 45 is that he played on people's hate. His entire rhetoric through the whole election was nothing but hate, down to a floating heap of trash in the Pacific Ocean called Puerto Rico. And still, Latino men put him in office. And now, here's the interesting thing. They're beginning to wonder if maybe they might be caught up in all these immigration reforms. You just thinking about that now? You didn't think about that 3 weeks ago? You didn't think about that on the day that he had his comedian call you a floating pile of trash?
Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
When he sat up there and talked about how there was a black man in the audience with a hat on, and the two of them sat there cutting watermelon for Halloween. Did this strike you as a group of men with integrity? You see, when people side against you, believe them when they tell you who they are. They had this so well down pat that people voted against their own self-interest and then eventually went, what have I done? Not all of them are done yet. You see, you have white men who have black children, and you had your children vote for Donald Trump? Why would you do that? Because when they are removed from the country, you won't be. So if you have teenage children and a black wife, you will lose your wife and your kids. And are you just going to leave them behind? Pretend like they're not a part of it? Because those are the choices that you will now have to make. You don't have to listen to me right now. This video will be here for when the day comes that you are looking at yourself going, what have I done? That your heart is ripped out of your chest because people that you genuinely loved in your family can't stay with you anymore. Some of you say, I'll go with them. If you're going to go with them, then why would you leave them to have to deal with that? Gentlemen, listen, I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I am here to warn you that there is a bigger problem on the horizon than many of you realize. And it requires you to strategically sit down and start making decisions over a truncated period of time. I want to tell you about a client of mine. She happens to be female. She has a husband that she has been working with, and this man is a piece of work. And he's been going through tooth pain in 4 teeth. But I want to explain something to you. He's been going through this tooth pain for a very long time, and he did nothing about it. But all of a sudden, she shows up and comes down to join him from another area. And now all of a sudden, the tooth pain is so much, he can't get anything done. You see, she is a black female and he's a white male. He will not be impacted by this, but she is. And so every day he is showing her how little value he has for her. His concept is, oh, I'll just make sure we have enough money for you to go. Well, don't you think there are other things you'd like to think about? What is available? What are some of the best ways that we can utilize? If you're going to send your wife out there by herself, don't you want to have some part of this? It doesn't make any logical sense. And these are the things that men are doing right now that are causing division in households and in families. And I want you to make sure that you look at this, because when you are not taking this seriously, you are ignoring what is happening to the spouse that you claim to love. You are telling her indirectly, I don't care what happens to you. That isn't part of my problem. You know, if you are a Caucasian male and you have a Caucasian spouse, you guys don't really have a lot to worry about because Trump's world is designed for you. You have conveniences that the rest of us don't have. And you need to both appreciate and begrudge that at the same time. Because I'm going to tell you straight, you cannot walk with the true God, the true Yahweh, and have that mindset. Because now you're just a nationalist. You talk the talk, but you're full of crap. You see, the thing is this. If I sit back and I vote against my friends who are white for somebody who is not, then I have just said to them, oh, you know what? It's just really, you're really not that big of a deal to me. And you need to understand that that's exactly how they take it. You know, there was one guy who was surprised that his wife, the day Trump won, served him with divorce papers. He was like, how could she do this? I don't understand. Well, let me think. You voted for a man who created a situation where for any medical care she needs, she has to go someplace else. And I want to tell you about this because many of you don't understand that. Many of you also know, because I've said it before, that our main office right now is in the state of Iowa. And Iowa is not by any, none of us are from, well, I think the big boss is from Iowa, but the rest of us are not from Iowa, right? I'm from California. Some of the other people are from other parts of the country as well. But during the summer months when it's not winter, that's the office that we work out of. To deal with some female issues I was having, to find a doctor worth their salt, I had to take myself to Arizona. I couldn't even find a doctor in California who could handle my OBGYN needs. And people will say, you didn't try every single one. I tried every one within my area, but they came to me with craziness and I wasn't interested. In Iowa, I'm in a completely white area, and it's a group of Caucasians who are not keen on people of color. Why would I come to you and ask you to help me with my health? I can't trust you that you're coming to me from a position of concern. You could be coming to me from a position of, let's make sure she can never have children again. Let's make sure, I get to make my own choices as to whether or not at my age I want to have children. I'm not trying to ever have children at this age, but what I want you to understand is I get to have my choice. It's freedom of choice. If I choose to carry a child to term, so be it. If it happens, so be it. But you don't get to, as someone who has no experience with living inside of this body for the years that I have, tell me what I am and am not going to do with myself. Do you understand? So while people kept making it about abortion wasn't the biggest issue. The biggest issue is that you can't even get basic medical care. But you also voted for the state to have the freedom to know your wife's medical history and what stage she's at in her pregnancy. How is it that you complain about the government being involved in your life right now and you open up a door for your wife to have to disclose to the government the most intimate time in her life? Most women who have children, who get pregnant to begin with, are not running out to get abortions. They're toiling over it. They're struggling with it, but they're also struggling with how to have the best experience with their health. And what are they supposed to do? Come to you? Unless you're an OBGYN, it's a struggle for you to understand what it is they're going through. There's a gentleman named Ben Shapiro, and he decided he wanted to do a conversation about Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion song, WAP. And if you don't know what that is, just look up those two people and listen to the song. And he claims that, Ben Shapiro that is, that his wife is a gynecologist. And she told him that this whole gushing thing was a serious disorder. See, that's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about not knowing the motivation of the person who is your doc. These are things that are hugely important, because when you are listening to someone you're supposed to be able to trust and they tell you you need to do X, Y, and Z, you do X, Y, and Z, and it results in the loss or death or sterility of your spouse. Now you can't do anything about it. Now you're stuck with somebody else having had control over what was going on with your wife's body. You see, these are the things that people voted for that is destroying families. It was never about the abortion issue. It was about healthcare. For a lot of people, it was about abortion, but the bigger issue was, this is what we have just put these young women into. Gentlemen, you got to get your family out of this country, only for a short while until this can be turned around. I know that they're saying, no, there's hope. I'm not telling you there isn't hope. I'm telling you it is 100% possible for this to completely turn around and not ever have to be something that permanently keeps people of color out of the area. There are things that they are doing that will turn and backfire on them. I promise you, you cannot do something with evil and think that it's going to stand. But there are certain things that it's going to take. Number one, it's going to take unity. It's going to take people being willing to come together and work together despite their differences. You're going to have people that you disagree with. You're going to have topics that you disagree with. But how you work through those topics is really what's going to matter. Number two, you have to have a solid plan of where you're going to take the country when you get it back. Number three, you have to toughen up, because when you have to go through the middle, it's going to look bleak and black and dark, and you're going to wish you had never entered this fight, and it's going to look like you're losing, but you have to hang in there. And number four, you have to remember when you get to the other side that we don't treat them the way they treated us. That does not mean that I accept that this is the stuff they did. Hitler killed himself ultimately. German Work Party, many of them ended up dead. Many of them ended up in prison, and many of them ran to live in other areas. Areas so far off the grid, they never have to worry about people of color walking into their life. They may have to deal with them for a short while, but then guess what? Ta-da! They're done. I want you to understand this because there are still options. But do you really want to take the chance of finding your family in a concentration camp set to being shipped somewhere or murdered by a group of hateful people? Don't forget, on Wounded Knee or at Wounded Knee, some army person freaked out from all the rhetoric he had heard and slaughtered a whole bunch of American Indians. These things happen because the rhetoric that they are told is so atrocious. It has them terrified of their own shadow. Do you really want to put your family in that position? On that note, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to ring the notification bell because you want to know every single time we have a new episode. I'll see you next week.